2, 1.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Chatham Board of Selectmen April 13th meeting. It's 5 p.m. and this is a remote participation only meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any phone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify me. I'm going to ask that if you're not speaking to please mute your phones or your computers, please. And I'll just reference something very quickly before we start the meeting. If the power does go out and you're unable to participate, the Board of Selectmen or any of the viewers, please use the call-in number, and I'm going to give it to you right now: 1-347-379-1643, and the conference ID number is 649224-159, followed by the hash sign. Okay. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 23, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Chatham Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling 1-347-379-1643, conference ID number 649224-159 hashtag, or joining the meeting via Microsoft Teams linked through the posted agenda. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide real-time access, and we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. And so in order for us to get our logistics here, I'm going to take a roll call of the Board of Selectmen to indicate that they're present. Corey Metters.
Present.
Dean Nicastro.
Present.
Jeff Dykins.
Present.
Peter Kokolis.
Present.
And obviously I'm present. So I just wanted to say to Jill, I say hi to Jill, and she's on the town manager's on the call as well. Can we have an indication of what staff is on the call, Jill?
Sure, Madam Chairman. So we have Alex Halila, Julie Smith, Katie Donovan, and just looking down here, Bob Duncanson, Ryan Darman, and that is all for right now.
And I think Mark from the Channel 18 team's on too.
Mark Van Bork, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Pat Costello here as well.
And Pat. Hi, Pat.
Hello.
Okay. Any other staff that wasn't indicated? Okay. All right. So our first order of business is I'm just checking on all my little notes I made. That's been done. Our second order of business, or first order of business, will be to accept the meeting minutes April 6th, 2020. Do I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes?
Madam So Chair, moved. Peter, motion to approve.
Peter, a
Second.
motion. And who second? I'm sorry.
Dean seconded.
Dean seconded. Any additions, edits, or comments on the meeting minutes? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call of the vote. Let's get started. Selectman Kokolis,
Aye.
Selectman Dykins,
Aye.
Selectman Nicastro,
Aye.
Selectman Metters,
Aye.
and the chair says aye. Okay, we have public announcements and agenda item requests. I just want to, we'll go through the board first. I'll roll call you, and then we'll ask for town staff, and then to the remote participants. So I want us to consider at a future date because of the selectmen's workload and the selectmen's employment situations, that we may want to consider a day change for the selectmen's meeting to accommodate members of the board who have conflicts at this time because of their job. So I just want to get that out there. to discuss in the future. Selectmen matters, do you have any public announcements or agenda item requests?
I think they're going to be covered under the citizens. I'm just looking for some general updates on some of our projects, the fish pier, et cetera, et cetera. So I think they're going to be covered with the citizen adjust request that was made by email. So no.
Okay. Do you want me to double back with you at all?
Basically, fish pier, West Chatham, trap dock, any and all of our projects. Just give a general update if we can. Yes.
Okay, great. Selectman Castro, do you have any agenda item requests or announcements or comments?
I do not.
How about you, Selectman Duncan?
No, I do not. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Selectman Kokolas?
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. And I just said we did have an agenda item request. Dr. Duncanson was very nice to accommodate on update on the trap dock and the fish pier tonight, which might take care of a portion of a citizen's agenda item request for those two items and the West Chatham roadway project, which we'll have to address at another date. So Dr. Duncanson, are you prepared to give us a quick update?
Yeah, Shireen, yes, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Can you all hear me pretty well?
Yes.
Okay, because I did a Teams meeting with the Board of Health a little while ago using a laptop and Wi-Fi, and was told it wasn't the clearest, so I thought I'd go back to the phone until we can work out whatever bugs we may have had over there. So quickly to give you kind of an update on our two major coastal waterfront projects, or actually I can touch on three of them very briefly. Regarding the first one, the Fish Pier Observation Deck, we had a punch list walkthrough with the engineer, Rick Pomeroy from Pomeroy Associates and town staff several weeks ago. We've submitted the punch list to the contractor. Last week, the contractor demobilized fairly substantially from the site. They have a little bit of material left on site. We are very close to completing that project. They have mostly just small items left to go. They were not working there this morning, but hopefully the weather is going to improve tomorrow. With that, I would fully expect within the end of this week or by the big end of next week, probably all the punch list items should be pretty well completed. There was just some handrail left to be done. The emergency gates at the south stairway, the emergency egress stairs needed to be installed. A couple of more bollards needed to be installed to prevent forklifts from going into areas where they shouldn't. But I can tell you all the electrical work was done. The lights are all in and completed. And the feedback we've gotten so far is the new lighting is just right on par. Not too dull. We don't have any dead spots. And it's also not too bright that it, looks like a soccer stadium in the middle of the night down there. So that's good news. So that project is getting very close to completion at this point. There's just a few minor items that remain left to be finished. As far as the trap dock goes, that project is moving along as well as can be expected given COVID-19. The contractors, as the board may be aware, the contractor did lose union carpenters and union pile drivers at the beginning of last week when the unions decided that no construction projects in Massachusetts could be done under the governor's guidelines and maintain social distancing and everything else. So that was kind of a bump in the road for ACK, the contractor there. They were able to subcontract out the form work because basically the one big item they have remaining to go on the pier portion itself is pouring the concrete for the new deck. And when they lost all the union carpenters and whatnot, that could have been a substantial delay. But they were able to bring a subcontractor in who they've worked with in the past, who does really good work. And so they're in the process right now, starting last week and hopefully finishing up today or maybe tomorrow, depending on the weather, getting all the form work done so that they can go ahead and get that deck poured. There's been a few other hiccups, none of them major. They're working through them. They estimated they're losing about 5 to 7 hours a week of time because of the protocols that the state recommended for continuing projects like this for COVID-19. You know, checking with all the staff coming on site every day to make sure nobody's sick or any symptoms. You know, stand downs during the day to clean tools and all those kinds of things. And so we've been having conversations with them about the final completion date as well as the substantial completion date, which is coming up later this week. More than likely, we're going to postpone that until around the 1st of May. We're kind of juggling two critical issues here. One is obviously the impacts of COVID-19, but the second is the fact that the fishing fleet that's currently over in Harwich is going to be heading for Chatham in the very not too distant future. So we need the contractor to work as quickly as they can and get things buttoned up as quickly as possible in anticipation of that fleet arriving in Chatham in, like I said, the not too distant future. So the contractor is trying to do everything they can. There has been discussion with them about going to 10-hour days as opposed to the normal 8-hour day. They're going to do that whenever they can. Obviously, if they've just poured concrete, you know, and they don't have, there's nothing else they can do until it sets up, you know, they're not going to go to 10-hour days. But if they are doing other items, they will then go ahead and go 10-hour days. And we are having discussions with them about some sort of compensation for that, along with extending the substantial completion date out. And probably the biggest unknown at this point is bringing power to the site, because we do have to work through Eversource, and as we know, that can be tricky sometimes. And I'm sure this storm, if it does amount to much tonight, potentially will be another roadblock getting Eversource out there as quickly as possible. So we have talked with the contractor and with Rick Pomeroy about a new target for substantial completion, which would basically remove electrification of the two new davits from substantial completion. So we would redefine substantial completion as when the town takes it over and starts using the pier after the concrete and all is properly cured and whatnot. And then we would opt, the davits would be installed, they just wouldn't be electrified yet because we'd have to wait for Eversource to get down there and redo the power coming into the Harbor Master building and then from there over to the trap dock project itself. Because we do need three-phase power out operating the davits. So those are three kind of things that we've worked through at our level. I'm going to be talking with town council about drafting up some sort of contract amendment or something to kind of memorialize those topics. And then we would continue to move that project along. I can tell you we are on budget. There has been one change order approved to date. And that has to do with the electrical system because we did try to upgrade the electrical system that's going into the Harbor Master building. Because one of the issues we ran into was we wanted to bring a separate service for the trap dock project. We can't do that under code. So we're basically revamping the entire electrical system as it comes into the Harbor Master building from the pole. And it's all going to be gone underground, which will get rid of the overhead wires that have been kind of problematic, moving, you know, higher boats and masts and things around. So that's been one change order. We do have another second pending change order, which has been agreed to, but we haven't signed the paperwork yet, which will put a guardrail along the side of the Harbor Master building so that we don't run the risk of vehicles hitting the side of the building when they traverse in and out, because it'll be wider, more open, and the chance of vehicles hitting will be greater once we finish the project than it currently is now, where it kind of looks like a driveway. So those are the only two change orders on the project. We're far enough along that I don't anticipate any others at this point. So budget-wise, the project is doing very well. And then just the third item that I can hit on very quickly, the dredging in Stage Harbor entrance channel. The dredge is on site. They are dredging. Obviously, this kind of weather is not helping at all. They lost a couple of days last week due to the winds and whatnot. They did have some mechanical issues over the weekend, which have all been resolved. But they are out there, and earlier today they indicated they were going to try to stay out there and work tonight, provided the conditions don't become too severe. They too are working under the state's COVID-19 protocols. You know, a little bit easier for them because most of their people are working in individual equipment. There's just 2 people out on the dredge usually, and so they can maintain the appropriate social distancing. So that project is underway. Has a little bit of a rocky start, but we're hoping now that things will kind of settle down and they'll get into a good rhythm from now through the end of the month. We did have a meeting with all the state, federal, and whatnot agencies. Ted Keon and I, a couple weeks ago, a conference call to talk about the potential for going beyond the May 1st deadline with the time of year restriction, as well as potentially having to do some dredging later in the summer. So we've initiated that discussion. All the agencies understand the difficulties of, you know, dredging in Chatham and the need to do it on a regular basis, given, you know, the barrier beach and whatnot. So that is all in the works. And I believe the board's been notified, but just for the folks at home, we had 2 projects with the Barnstable County dredge. We had them dredging in Mill Creek to supplement sand on Cockle Cove Beach. And then they were also bringing a second dredge to town to dredge Aunt Lydia's Cove. That material was going to go up on the Linnell Lane area. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has shut down the county dredge program. And at this point, we don't know when the county is going to be able to get those dredges into Chatham, but we're keeping an eye on that, and we've been talking with them. They understand the urgency, obviously, and as soon as they're able, given the current public health situation, they will do that. So those are some quick updates, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bob. I have one question about the trap dock. With the power electric delay, how is that impacting the upweller on getting up and running for the spring?
It won't impact the upweller at all. Once we have a date from Eversource, it should only take a day, maybe 2, to make the switch over. So we don't anticipate having any substantial impact on the upweller.
Even if they've already started their putting the little creatures in the buckets and everything. I know that when the power went out during the tornado, that was a big issue.
Yeah, one of the things we're doing as part of this project, which we had originally put in the FY21 budget, was to put in a connection so that if we needed to, we could bring a generator in and power the upweller pumps. We're going to do that as part of this project, so that would theoretically already be in place before we would change over the power. So worst case, if we had to, we could bring a generator in to power those pumps for a day or so while the power is cut over.
Super, thanks. I'm going to go down the line here to ask if the selectmen have any questions. Peter, do you have any questions for Dr. Bob?
Yeah, just one simple one. Do you have any idea if the yacht club is doing anything? Are they continuing, or have they put everything on hold?
Last I heard from them, they were continuing. They were getting ready to go out to bid. So if they haven't already gone out to bid, which I now think they may have done so, yeah, that was the last we heard, but I believe they were planning to move forward.
Thank you.
Corey, do you have any questions for Dr. Bob?
No real questions. I mean, just some comments under the current COVID-19 situation, the update on the trap dock, I'm relatively pleased with. I understand there's a lot of issues going on. So all in all, you know, better news than I expected. And as far as the fish pier goes, I'm just going to hold my tongue. Punch list, I don't know how long that really translates to. So thanks for the update.
Thanks, Corey. Dean, do you have any questions for Dr. Bob?
Thank you. Just on the fish pier, Bob, is the lift operational? Is that fully installed? Or is that one of the punch list items?
The list is fully installed. It is operational. The one item we do have to resolve is a telephone connection. There is an emergency telephone inside the lift, which needs to be connected to some location. So we're working those specifics out right now between the town, the vendor, the contractor, the phone company, as to exactly how that's going to work.
Thank you.
Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Bob. Just quickly on the fish pier, that Selectman Nacastro asked my question about the lift, but the building inspector's been down, the electrical inspector's signed off, Pomeroy's happy. Well, that happened after all the punch list items are done.
That would normally happen after all the punch list items are done. The contractor has not yet requested their certificate of occupancy from the building department. That would trigger that level of inspection.
Yeah, the it's stout enough. I know that. So thank you, Bob. Good update.
Thanks, Bob. Does anybody in remote participation have a question for Dr. Duncanson?
I have a question.
Who's speaking, please?
Frank Messina.
Yes, go ahead.
Dr. Duncanson, can I ask a little bit of a clarification? You indicated the Stage Harbor Channel dredging is continuing and it possibly might continuing after April. Did I misunderstand you?
No, you're correct. The Stage Harbor dredging is underway, and we have a time of year restriction of May 1st. We actually had, well, for clarification, we actually have two time of year restrictions. One is to place the material up on the beach itself because of endangered bird species, but we've worked that out. The pipeline from the dredge to the beach is offshore in Nantucket Sound in the area where the birds normally are this time of year. So that's no longer an issue. And then the sand is being placed up in front of the two parking areas where we don't have any restrictions because of birds. The other restriction that we have is in the entrance channel itself. It has to do with horseshoe crabs. That kicks in on May 1st. So we're going to try to get as much done as we can between now and May 1. And then as I said, we've already had some discussions about a possible incursion after May 1 for several days with the state agencies, and they're receptive. They haven't granted it yet because we haven't actually formally made the request yet.
Thank you very much. I guess I'll put my sailboat in this summer.
Thank you. Any other remote participants, questions for Dr. Duncanson? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to well, before we do, thank you, Dr. Duncanson. And I do want to remind the remote participants to identify yourself when you speak to be heard. Are there any other public announcements or agenda item requests from any staff or other remote participants?
This is Steve Buckley. I have a request.
Hi, Steve. Go right ahead.
Of course, you read off at the beginning of the session that the governor doesn't have a problem with remote participation during the emergency. However, before that was issued, the town manager issued an advisory that public meetings for advisory committee meetings are canceled until further notice. And of course, she didn't anticipate, I don't think she anticipated that the governor was going to say it was okay to do remote meetings. So it says these measures will be reevaluated on an ongoing basis, according to that notice from the town manager. So I'm asking whether that be a new item or something maybe the town manager can reevaluate or however that's happening. But I'm on the Economic Development Committee, and certainly we would like to discuss what the coming summer season might hold because of all the social distancing, et cetera, and so forth and so on. So, but we're prohibited from discussing it, otherwise we would be in violation of open meeting law. So anyway, I'm just asking that that be considered as a way to allow us to even just do a phone conference, not necessarily Microsoft Teams, but letting us meet in remote. So that's my request. Thank you.
Steve, I did get a phone call from one of the other members asking the same. It might be a consideration, obviously, because of the nature of that committee's work, to consider it. But we'll definitely have that conversation very soon, and perhaps sooner than not. So, any other public announcements and meeting item requests or agenda item requests from the remote participants?
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Hi,
Jill.
it's Jill. At your last meeting, we discussed the pause on the meetings for the non-regulatory boards until May 4th, and at that time it will be reconsidered. This time we have very limited staffing, and staff is required to do staff liaison duties, and so what we had discussed with the board and the board affirmed through consensus is that we're going to reevaluate it on May 4th.
Thank you for the reminder. That's great. Thanks. All right. Do we have any other announcements or requests? Okay, moving on, we are going on to new business. Item A is COVID-19 update by the Director of Health and Natural Resources and the Town Manager. And we are going to get those updates, then we're going to discuss a revote of the tax relief measure, which I'm sure Jill will include in her update. So Dr. Duncanson, would you like to go again?
Sure. So just quickly, right now there's a little over 1.9 million cases of COVID-19 worldwide, with almost 119,000 deaths worldwide. In the US, we're a little over 570,000 cases and almost 22,000 deaths. Getting a little bit more specific to Massachusetts, these are numbers that just came out about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Massachusetts has almost 27,000 cases. There have been 844 deaths so far in Massachusetts. And Cape Cod, or in Barnstable County, we have 502 cases, which is interesting because we had 501 cases yesterday. So I don't know whether this is real or just an anomaly in terms of reporting, but it may be very good news, because the Cape is definitely starting to do the social distancing well and really working towards flattening that curve. We did have one additional death in Barnstable County reported in today's numbers, bringing the total up to 17. Specifically for Chatham, right now we have 4 cases and we have 1 suspect case. The test results aren't back yet. So we have 4 active cases in Chatham and 1 suspect, for a total of 5, if you include the 1 suspect case. There hasn't been a whole lot of change over the weekend in terms of new guidance or anything coming out of the state or the feds. Probably, as everyone is aware, the biggest change to guidance at the end of last week was the recommendation from the CDC and then the governor, and then others, that everyone, when they're outdoors, in any kind of situation where they may be interacting with other people, should be wearing some kind of a face covering, whether it's a mask or a bandana or a homemade reusable mask. Everybody, especially in areas where you can maintain that recommended 6-foot social distancing, such as, grocery stores or pharmacies, everybody should be wearing some kind of face covering. And we do have information on that up on the COVID-19 webpage, including directions from CDC of how to make your own masks or face covering if you want to, out of t-shirts and bandanas and things like that. So it doesn't need to be very complicated for people to do this. But I really would encourage folks, if you're going into the grocery store or some other place where you can maintain that 6-foot social distance, to go ahead and wear those face coverings. They really are important. And if the numbers hold true, they are being very effective. We are starting to see that caseload, at least on the Cape, starting to flatten out, and that will be very good news. The EOC continues to be up and running. The majority of issues that the EOC has been dealing with have to do with food pickups and prescription pickups for folks that are, restricted in their ability to do that. So we've been trying to handle those, and that's been going very well with the CERT team. And other towns are now looking at us as kind of a model for how to make this work in a well-oiled process. We were also hopeful, and hopefully it did come in either today or tomorrow, some PPE that was received through MEMA. We were supposed to get it at the end of last week because some of our agencies, such as the fire department, are getting fairly low on N95 masks. And so we're hopeful that that will come in here shortly, and we'll be able to restock them and continue, because they had a run on those over the weekend because of the number of cases. And as everybody's talking about, we theoretically in Massachusetts, we are very close to being, the peak of the surge this week and possibly next week. So it'll be very important to get that material in to make sure our first responders have what they need to do their jobs. So with that, that's kind of all I've got for a quick update.
Shireen, you're muted.
I just wanted to remind everybody of the number of the Emergency Operations Center, 508-945-5191. And the email is Chatham, EOC, @chatham-ma.gov. Thank you, Dr. Bob. That was really great. Any questions for Dr. Bob before we move on to Jill's update? Corey, any questions for Dr. Duncanson?
No, all set. Thank you.
Dean.
Yes, Bob, I don't know if this is a fair question to ask you or whether members of the Board of Health could answer this at some future point. Just by way of comparison, so in Barnstable County, Cape Cod, 502 cases and 17 deaths. In an average year, do we have any information about how many cases of the flu we have and how many people die from the flu?
I don't have any of that information right now, but I can certainly try to find out and report back to you.
That would be an interesting piece of information if we could get it in the future. Thank you. No other questions. Good report.
Okay, Jeff, any questions for Dr. Duncanson?
I just have one question for Dr. Bob. Are we comfortable that the VNA is doing its role as a contact tracer and following up on the active cases and the suspect case, or the active cases that we have, Bob? Are we comfortable? I think it's an important piece here.
Yes, we've had a very good working relationship with the VNA. They are doing yeoman's work for us. So yes, we're very happy with it. Obviously, as the number of cases potentially goes up, we've all heard the governor has created a new tracking program and organization. And we'll see whether or not, that needs to be tapped into, but we've already kind of had that conversation with VNA that resource is out there if we get to the point where we need it.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Peter, any questions or comments for Dr. Bob?
No, thank you. Jeff asked the question I had.
Then, okay. Any questions from the remote participants for Dr. Duncanson in relationship to his report? Hearing none, I will say thank you very much, Dr. Duncanson, and thank the EOC team for their hard work and their diligence in this. Okay, so moving on, Jill, Town Manager's COVID-19 update.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chairman. So we're still at our critical staffing levels. We have those working remotely as well as rotations. So very skeleton crew on DPW. They're performing as best as can be expected, but in-office crew is somewhat limited. So core services are still being addressed. The phones are being answered, mails being processed, maybe a little slower than usual, but that work is being done. And then inspectional services is also working 3 days a week. So that information is on the website as well. we're continuing our efforts for public information. Last Friday, I sent a swift 911 call to all of our town employees, encouraging them to take a break and take care of their mental and physical health as well while they're working at their kitchen tables, at their offices, and that was well received. So again, energy is up, and we're very fortunate that staff has not yet been affected by the virus. So very lucky with that. We're also continuing our community outreach with what we called our community update. Shauna had helped craft it, and we'll issue one tomorrow, basically talking about what Dr. Bob had just reported, as well as the board's actions of tonight. So we'll get that information out. And then the item in your packet it was a revote, is a revote of the tax relief measures that the board had voted last week. What we did find out is that that vote didn't quite go far enough from what the state allows us to relieve our taxpayers. And so there's a staff report that Shauna had provided, as well as information from the treasurer collector, Sharon Drown, that actually has, we were requesting the board to go a little further and also include excise tax, betterment assessments, which there are very few, and water and sewer bills. So this provides an extension to that for the taxes for June 1st, and then also for the water bills that are just going out. So that waives the penalty and charges for late payments. So I'll go back. The property tax bills went out on March 23rd. Motor vehicle excise tax, there's one that was issued on February 10th. That was due on March 11th, and then there would have been a demand billing, which meant that we would try to get people to pay, and that was issued on was issued on March 31st, and it's due on the 14th. So what this does is provide some relief for those late payment fees. And then the water and sewer billing, there were billings issued on March 3rd that were due on April 2nd, and then the March billing was issued on April 8th, that's due on May 8th. So again, it provides a waiver of any late payment penalties for the utility billing, and then for the excise tax due date, that's June 1st versus May 1st. And that's it for my report.
Thank you, Jill. Any questions for Jill before we move to a suggested action on the motion, on the recommendation from the tax collector? Corey?
No, I am good. Thank you.
Okay, and feel free to offer that motion if anybody wants to. Dean?
Yeah, I just had a question about the motion. I'm happy to offer it. It specifically authorizes, adopts Section 11 of the recent legislation, Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020. Does that include, because it doesn't, the motion doesn't expressly refer to waiver of interest. Does Section 11 include the waiver of interest? And does Section 11 also specify the postponement to June 1st of the date for payment? Because that also is not expressly included in the proposed motion. So those are my questions.
Okay. Jill, can you weigh in?
I have some of the information. So it's within accordance of Section 11. I don't have it in front of me, but that was the basis for which the board had voted the extension from May 1st to June 1st. And that had to do with bills that were issued like on or after March 13th, which is the emergency declaration by the governor. Actually, that was the 10th. We do have Pat Costello, our town council, on if he wants to weigh in on it.
Sure. I don't have the motion in front of me for tonight's meeting, so that would obviously be helpful in ascertaining whether it's complete or not. The Section 11 of the Chapter 53 of the Special Act does authorize each one of the actions that Dean had enunciated. I did participate in a conference earlier this week actually late last week with Patricia Hunt from DLS involved, and she did indicate that there was a lot of confusion amongst municipalities as to whether or not towns could pick and choose between the various types of assessments and payments that were due. And the Department of Revenue Division of Local Services opinion is that you cannot. So you have to adopt the full array, if you will, of extensions that are afforded to those various type of payments. The waiver of interest is incorporated into the same section. I believe that would be inclusive of the board's vote under section 11. If it were to adopt the extension to a date certain up to June 1st, it would also eliminate any interest payments that would have accrued during that period of time.
Okay, I'm happy. This is Dean again. I'm happy to offer the motion. And I'm assuming also that section 11 applies to personal property tax as well as real estate tax. But let me offer the motion. I think
That's correct.
Jill may have just flashed it on the screen here, so you may be able to see it now, Pat. Madam Chair, I move that in accordance with Section 11 of Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020, the Board of Selectmen adopts Section 11 pertaining to excise tax, betterment assessment or apportionment thereof, water rate or annual sewer use or other charge added to a tax for any payments with a due date on or after March 10, 2020, with an understanding that the extension of due dates for real estate and personal property tax and waiving of penalties and fees respective of these two assessments were previously voted on and approved by the Board of Selectmen on Monday, March 30th, 2020.
Thank you,
Second.
Jeff. We have a motion by Dean. Jeff seconded it. Do we have any further discussion by the board?
Madam Chair, I just for clarification, if you look at section 11, it's in the next portion, 3 ways down. I mean, it has to do with whether or not you can turn off essential services, and basically it says you on a due date of March 10th made after its respective due date but before June 30th. Is that a conflict with June 1st, or is it just a point that even if you don't pay by June 1st, you still can't get your services cut off? It's about a little past 3 ways, halfway down, and the sentence starts notwithstanding.
Peter, who are you directing the question to?
I guess maybe Jill and to the town council.
Yeah, I'll be happy to weigh in if you'd like, Madam Chairman. That
Sure.
provision, Peter, relates to the statutory remedies that allows a city or town to terminate services when fees or charges aren't paid. And as you noted, what that provision says is that the town will not terminate the essential service of a resident as itemized therein for non-payment of those taxes or fees if they are due after March 10th and made prior to June 30th. So that eliminates the use of that collection remedy under Mass General laws for folks who haven't paid their fees and charges before June 30th, 2020. In other words, the town wouldn't be able to avail itself of that remedy till July 1st or thereafter.
Thank you, Pat.
Madam
Is that
Chair,
satisfactory, Peter?
Yes, thank you.
Madam Chair, it's
Yes.
Dean. I just wanted to clarify, because in neither section 11 nor in the motion that was presented to us by the town treasurer as of June 1st, is it our understanding that if this motion is voted in, the due date for payment of taxes is June 1st? Because as I recall, Alex told us last week that was the farthest out date you could defer your taxes to. Is that the correct understanding of whoever wants to answer that question?
Yes.
This is Pat again. I would specify June 1st in the motion as the due date. That's the farthest out date you can go, as you noted, Dean, but I think specification of the date would eliminate any confusion or ambiguity in that regard.
Dean, do you want to amend your motion?
Well, didn't we? I'm happy to do that, but I wanted to ask, did we not adopt June 1st as the due date on March 30th? And therefore, I could just add at the end with a due date after March 30th, 2020. Let me amend the motion by adding
Thank you.
comma with a due date of June 1st, 2020, as previously voted.
Thank you, Dean. And Peter, Jeff?
Second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Second.
All right. Any further discussion from the board on the motion? Any questions or just from the remote participants? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call for the vote. Corey?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Okay, thank you very much. The next item for discussion and is the fiscal year 2021 / annual town meeting 2020 funding priorities. And the presentation and discussion will start off with the town manager, and the finance director will be revisiting the fiscal year 2021 proposed operating and capital budgets, then the 2020 annual town meeting warrant articles, our priorities, and then potential dates for the 2020 annual town meeting and election. And this is an ongoing discussion that we started last week. So Jill and Finance Director Halela, would you like to kick it off?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So tonight, there's not a lot new to report as it relates to the FY 2021 budget. We're still working on it. And what we hope to do is provide you recommendations at your meeting on April 27th, which is your next regularly scheduled meeting. Alex has assisted me and prepared a report, so I can turn this over to her and she can talk about COVID-19 expenditures to date, as well as other items relating to the FY 2021 budget. And then I do have the town clerk, Julie Smith, available to answer any questions about setting the date for the election. So if you're okay with it, I'll turn it over to Alex.
Absolutely, go right ahead. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd like to update the figures that we have. In the packet, we had reported that the COVID-19 expenditures to date, and that was through April 9th, had been $138,425. As of Friday, which was April 10th, that number increased to $144,428. So as these invoices come in, we keep on asking for updates from the different departments, and we'll keep on reporting them as we provide updates to the board. So moving on from that, we've asked all the department heads to revisit their FY 2021 budget requests, both operating and capital, looking for any reductions that they might have. So we've gotten some of those back. They're still under review right now. As the town manager said, we'll be going through those and presenting something further on this month. But again, we're looking for those, as well as some other items, whether or not we need to have a directive for a 1% decrease across the board from all departments, as was noted in our memo of April 8th, requesting for review of their budget requests. Same thing with the capital budget. Any items that are able to be deferred will be, so we can preserve any free cash moving forward for next year, knowing that revenues will be down, and that's our biggest source of free cash for the coming year in the FY 22 planning. So again, looking at all those, everyone is still going through those right now. We did ask the board last week to prioritize some of those items that were proposed for FY 2021. I think Shauna has been collecting those, so we'll revisit those as well with a plan later on this month. So really that's all I have. I don't have much new to report on that. We're still compiling all the information that we've received. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Alex. I'm going to roll down the board to ask if they have any questions of you. Jeff, any comments or questions for Alex on the two items she discussed?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Alex, for that report. You're not looking for any particular direction this evening. I'm fairly certain that there are a couple things I could even move tonight that I think we could take off the table and alleviate some of the pressure or potential pressures on cash, if you will. I thought there were two items that were mentioned last time that I would certainly, I would be willing to move this evening. One of which is the OPEB, taking the OPEB of $150,000 off the tax rate. And then the other one is to not support the capital stabilization fund funding in the amount of 1.7 million. Now, I you have to refresh my memory. I know we've placed those on the warrant. I guess we've also recommended them, but I'm more than willing, and I don't quite know mechanically how we withdraw them, but I would be willing to move those two items in particular as not going forward. So I'm ready to do that. But I think those are no-brainers in terms of how we have two very direct means to preserve cash and maintain increased liquidity in the town of Chatham for FY21.
So I guess the question,
I don't know whether you want to do that alone or whether you want to wait for the whole thing or not. I don't know, Shireen.
well, I guess the bigger question is the process for me. Are we voting to not recommend them? Is that how we do this? Because we voted to place them on the warrant. And I just want to understand the process. So maybe Pat can weigh in on that.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question, please?
So if we voted to prioritize or to take the OPEB 150,000 off of that we don't want to support it anymore going forward with a warrant, what's our process? We just revote not to recommend it, or is there another process to take it off the warrant? I don't think we can take it.
Well, if the board has voted to close the warrant,
yes,
that is an article that's been sponsored by the board or presented on behalf of general town government. The board could vote to reopen the warrant and to remove that and or any other articles that it chooses to take off of the warrant, and then vote to close the warrant once again.
Okay. So Jeff, does that make sense to just maybe wait until, do you feel like wait?
No. I think we wait.
Okay.
I think we wait. Yeah, I think we wait.
And
We'll
I'll
do it all at once.
everybody else is welcome to weigh in on that matter as we go down. Anything else, Jeff? Okay. I think you're muted. Peter, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, just a clarification from Alex. In the background paper that we had, could you go over the tax levy and how that works? I think I understand it, but I just want to make sure that you made a comment. There's one comment in there that says even with a tax levy and using that, we'd still be behind on being a bare basic, getting down to the 50% of the budget. Did I read that correctly, or is it? I guess I just asked. Just give me a quick on tax levy, especially as you bring the budget down, how that operates.
Okay, thank you. When we were crafting the budget, we look at the amount that we can raise through the tax levy, and local estimated receipts reduces the amount that's directly raised through taxes, although it's considered part of the whole tax levy and our tax recap. But the more that we raise in local estimated receipts, the less we have to impact the tax rate. So with reducing those local estimated receipts down from 85% of or 80% of prior year actual down to 50% of prior actual, we're now using any excess levy capacity that we had, because we were leaving some excess levy capacity out there to provide relief to the taxpayer. So going through these cuts, we're still looking to provide relief to the taxpayer and not tax to the maximum amount that we could, which would have been that $38,469,000. Which if we did that, that would be a 7.74% increase to the tax levy and the tax rate. We don't like to do that. That's not been our practice. We always try to leave some excess levy capacity on the table. But however, with these cuts being so drastic without cutting any of the budget and even looking at some of them, we have to find another $260,000 of savings and then find other reductions in order to provide relief.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I just misread it. I read it backwards compared to what you just said now. Okay.
Okay.
All set, Peter? Anything else?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. All right. Corey, any questions or for Alex?
Just one question. When it comes to the specific COVID-19 related expenses, you said we're about $144,000 roughly that we've expended so far. We obviously, that number we'll assume will be going up. I mean, how high, I don't know. Do we have to be concerned about how high that number gets to a certain point? Are we going to be looking for any type of reimbursement from the state for any of this? Can you just talk a little bit on that for me, please?
Yes. We've already submitted onto the MEMA website initial interest in any reimbursement should there be some. There was a declaration of emergency both by the federal government and the state government, so we have those. And that's one reason why we're trying to track all these expenses, both payroll-related expenses for overtime, which will most likely be eligible for reimbursement, as well as any eligible expenditures. We've created a special code for the department heads to code everything to a special line item to make it easier to track. And the EOC and the DPW have been tracking all those expenses, and I've asked them both to submit those to me on a weekly basis so I can provide the board and the town manager with the updates.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Corey. Dean.
Yes, Alex, thank you. I wanted to ask you a follow-up to Peter's question. So if you have the 50% on local receipts and somehow find a way to reduce the operating budget by the additional 261,000, or that deficit figure that you're showing in your memo, would we still be talking about a substantial increase in the tax rate?
We're looking through it, and we'll also look at other available funds that can offset some of that from the tax rate. So again, I'm combing through everything that we have to try and reduce that impact.
Okay. One other point, at the webinar that was sponsored by the Mass Municipal Association that I attended on Friday, there was an indication that even though there might be grant monies coming, and you just mentioned that we might be able to get some for the COVID-related expenses, they wouldn't be covering, they wouldn't be providing any grant assistance for lost revenues, from what I understand. Is that your understanding as well? That's what they were saying.
Yeah, that is my understanding.
Two other questions. The COVID expenses of 144,000, without getting down into too many particulars, what is the nature of those expenses? What are the charges for?
Quite a bit of it is for the cleaning that is being done to the different buildings. So we just paid an invoice for about $88,000
Okay.
for the cleaning. So that's probably the bulk of it.
Okay. And lastly, because from the discussion last week, and I expect we're going to hear more about it tonight, we're trying to preserve free cash.
Correct.
We're talking about eliminating, as Jeff was saying, the stabilization piece and the 150,000. We approved following the March town meeting $75,000 out of free cash for the Stepping Stones business. Do we know how much of that has been expended already, roughly?
I do not know, but I can get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Any questions or comments from the remote participants? Hearing none. So this is a continued conversation. If we to the 27th of April, unless we have any other comments on this portion of the of item B for Alex or for Jill. Okay, hearing none. So Jill, do you want to briefly go over the warrant articles again, or are we just going to report out that we're assessing the board, you're assessing the board priorities for the meeting on the 27th.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So we are doing that, but we also invited Town Council Pat Costello to participate on this call because there were some questions about the petition articles. There is an opinion that's included in the packet, and if you had any questions about those specific articles, the petition articles for the annual town meeting, he is on the line if you have any questions.
Great. Dean, do you have any questions for Pat in that respect on the petition articles? I think what we were, I think one of the things that I was interested in is how the scenario works if we have. I guess I gave two examples. Like if we had an annual town meeting that was postponed to the fall, and was it possible to do a special town meeting just to vote the operating budget? The other piece was, how are the petition articles impacted if we did do a simple bare bones annual town meeting this fall? And Dean, I didn't know if you had any further questions for Pat before.
Well, I think it was Jeff who mentioned the possibility. I thought of it myself as well, of instead of having the annual town meeting on a date prior to June 30th, that we do it in the fall and have a special town meeting to deal only with the budget, because there are a bunch of petition articles and also various selectmen articles that we may want to defer. The more I've thought of it, it seems to me to make more sense to have an annual town meeting in June, assuming that's physically possible. We'll know more in another month. I guess Jill or Pat can tell us what's the last date by which we have to make that determination. But she has proposed an annual town meeting date of the 22nd of June with the town election of the 25th. My thinking is that if we were to proceed with an annual town meeting on the 22nd of June, we would have, I will call a minimalist budget that will reflect board priorities and the town manager and the finance director's efforts to whittle down the ultimate cost. There would still be petition articles and other warrant articles. If I suppose we could, as was mentioned earlier, reopen the warrant, eliminate any that we didn't want to go forward, and then close the warrant again, or we simply have them included in the warrant but not offer motions. That would result in those not going forward. I kind of like that approach.
Yeah.
I just throw that out. That's my understanding of how we might proceed. So I didn't have any particular questions at this time for Pat on that. I do have a question or two when we get to the town election of either Pat or Julie Smith. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey, do you have any questions or on?
Well,
go ahead.
Yes, I do. So we have 8 petition articles, obviously each with their own impact. And I think just for, the future viewing public, can we kind of just walk through this a little bit? Because I had to read these a couple of times myself to be clear what the scenarios, were walking through this. So I think people are going to be very, not confused, but it's a little more detailed. So if we could just walk through some of these scenarios, maybe it would be helpful for the viewing public, please.
Okay. Pat, are you prepared to do that?
Yes, I don't have a copy of your warrant in front of me, but I'm happy to discuss any of the articles as I brought up.
Okay. Corey, any further for Pat?
Well, I mean, in our packet, they talk about the COA, but we do have 7. Like I said, we have 8 petition articles, and basically running this. Okay, could we walk through the scenario if we were to have a annual town meeting in June? The petition articles, under my understanding, would be placed on that meeting, and then could we just kind of walk through a scenario of how these would be mechanically dealt with?
Sure, I can address that, Madam Chair. The petition articles have to appear in the warrant, Corey, because it's mandatory obligation of the Board of Selectmen to place them on the warrant under Chapter 39, Section 10, when sufficient signatures are verified on the petition. The action that can be taken on the petition articles can vary. In essence, it comes down to the will of the petitioners and the town meeting as to how those particular articles are disposed of at the meeting. A petitioner could move to indefinitely postpone consideration of their petitioned article. They could move to postpone consideration of the article to a date certain, to which the annual town meeting is continued. They could take no action on it. If no motion is made under an article appearing in the warrant, then it will be de facto passed over, and when the town meeting adjourns, the article dies on the vine, so to speak. And finally, a petitioner could always, seek to have debate, discussion, and a vote on the substance of his, her, or their article. So those are the four options, in essence, that the petitioner would have with respect to his or her article. Once an article, a motion is made under an article and the matter is thus on the town meeting floor, it opens up other procedural motions along the lines that I just noted that other members of town meeting voting body could make. For example, someone else could move to postpone indefinitely a petitioned article once the discussion or deliberation under that article has taken place. But it's difficult to predict in any type of summary or general fashion how town meeting would react to such motions. Suffice it to say that notwithstanding those procedural motions that could be made, if a petitioned article is not actually moved and brought to the floor during town meeting, and the annual town meeting subsequently adjourns, then those articles become null and void. They die. Certainly, petitioners could submit petitions once again for a future town meeting, whether it be a special town meeting or an annual town meeting, to resurrect the petitions or bring them back before the town meeting for consideration. But it's the petitioner's call as to whether or not to move them on the town meeting floor, and or if they are not addressed at a particular town meeting, whether or not to repetition them for a subsequent town meeting.
Madam Chair, this is Dean. Can I ask a follow-up question on that?
Absolutely.
Pat, so if a petition article is on the warrant and the petitioner or the petitioners don't offer a motion, is it open to anyone on the floor to offer a motion? Because the article is on the warrant? Or can someone on the floor offer a motion only if the petitioners offer a motion?
Well, anyone could offer a motion under the article to place it on the town meeting floor for discussion purposes. Once it is on the floor, as I noted earlier, then other procedural motions would apply. But to answer your question, no, it doesn't have to be the petitioners themselves that offer a motion on an article. However, that is, without question, typically the way they are opened up for discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I'm trying to think if I got everybody covered. I didn't make my little hash mark checkoffs. Corey, did you wait? You weighed in. Dean weighed in. Jeff?
Yeah, the only question I have, I think, is for Julie. As we go forward, I'd like to know what the latest date is to have a go, no go on an annual on June 22nd and an election on the 25th. That's what I would like to know.
Mm-hmm. Is Julie available?
I'm here.
Thank you. Did you hear the question, Julie?
I did. So the question was for the last date to have the election. Was that, did I hear that, understand that correctly?
Well, what date would be the go, no-go date for an annual town meeting on June 22nd and an election on June 25th? How much lead time, when's the last date that we could make a decision and still have a go?
Okay, so I can speak to the election. The last date, well, you do have to choose a date before the regularly scheduled annual town election. So you would have to meet and choose a date before May 14th.
For the election?
2 days for the election, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Julie, so, but not for this, for the, not for the town meeting. The town meeting.
Right. I
Okay.
don't have the special act in front of me for the town meeting because I was
Yeah.
prepared to speak to the election. Maybe Pat could step in
Sure.
for that one. Thank you.
That would be chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020,
Okay.
which allows the Board of Selectmen to vote to continue or reschedule, delay is the word used in the statute, the town meeting to a date no later than June 30th. And in my view, the board could vote to take that action up to the date of the actual meeting, the original meeting scheduled date.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Dean, I want to clarify, get some clarification on the point Julie made. So Julie, are you saying that if we wanted to have a town election on, let's say, June 25th, which is what I think you were proposing, we have until May 14th to make that determination? Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. There are 2 dates that are triggered under the Acts of Chapter 45 of the Acts of 2020. The first thing is it has to be at least 20 days prior to the date you're selecting. But more importantly, you have to choose the date prior to your originally scheduled date of your election. So I would just ignore that 20 days prior and just understand that you have to have that vote before May 14th.
Another question that sort of interrelates between the election and town meeting. The selectmen have voted to put the senior center project for 1610 Main Street on the warrant and voted unanimously to recommend approval. We also voted to place a ballot question for bonding authorization on the election ballot. When do the selectmen, my recollection is that we get to see or approve the election ballot. Is that correct, Julie? And when does that happen? And what happens, Pat, in terms of if we decide not to offer a motion on 1610 Main Street or open and close the warrant and pull it off the warrant, we still have a ballot question on the election ballot, or would we be able to remove that from this particular election if we decide to defer action on 1610 Main Street until a future town meeting? So there are 2 questions there, one for Julie, I guess, and one for you, Pat.
Sure. Do you want to go first, Julie, or shall I?
Pat, if you'd like to go first, I'll defer to you first.
Okay. The 1610 Council on Aging question is a debt exclusion contingent appropriation borrowing authorization article. The town meeting vote and the ballot question go hand in hand. Neither one has any force or effect without the other being approved. Now, there is no requirement in the statute, Chapter 59, Section 21C, that the town meeting vote take place first. It is unusual, but it is permissible for the ballot question to be voted prior to the town meeting appropriation and borrowing authorization vote. It doesn't usually happen that way, but the Board of Selectmen, I would suggest, if it chooses to reopen the warrant and remove the 1610 appropriation article from the warrant, it could likewise remove the ballot question from the annual town election warrant. The provisions of Section 21C, subsection M, state that a ballot question on a debt exclusion has to be voted either by September 15th following the date of an annual town meeting or within 90 days of another town meeting wherein the appropriation is made. Whether the legislature chooses to further amend those provisions of general law in light of the fact that many towns may very well be continuing their town meetings beyond June 30th now is open speculation at this point. However, the annual town meeting, if it were to be deferred to a point in time beyond its present date, would have to have this ballot question voted by September 15th, 2020. So that if the ballot question is taken off of the annual election ballot that should proceed in May or thereafter, it could always be, placed on a later special election ballot, or there's a November presidential election coming up, as we know. So there are other possibilities, but there's no real magic to sequencing the town meeting vote and or the ballot question, aside from the fact that the ballot question has to be passed within the September 15th post-annual town meeting or 90 days after any other town meeting at which the appropriation is made.
Thank you, Pat. Julie? Excuse me.
Yeah.
Dean had a question for you as well.
It had to do with when do we get the ballot for approval. I think we have to take a vote to call the town election. Do we see a ballot at that point?
I would post a separate warrant for you all to sign. The other important thing, though, that I do want to mention before I forget is that I would like to have the absentee ballots prepared and ready for mailing as far ahead as I could. Generally, for a regular, normal election, we have the ballots available 3 weeks prior. I think I'd like to have much earlier than 3 weeks prior, just because of this situation. I think more people are going to be voting or will want to vote from home and not have to put themselves in the situation of being in a large group potentially, because we don't know at the end of June if things will still be the way they are now or if they'll be cleared up. So, a month or two ahead of time, generally I like to have the question and have my ballot ready to go to the printer. So as early as you could get that signed would be great for the voters.
Thank you. One other question I had to Pat in light of what he said. So if I understand it, it might make sense just to keep the ballot question on 1610 Main Street on the ballot for this year's annual election. Let's assume it takes place on June 25th. And if that is approved by a majority of the voters at the polls, we could still then present 1610 Main Street for authorization to town meeting at a special town meeting in the fall or in late summer, whenever we call it. And that ballot question, even though it was voted prior to that town meeting, let's assume we get a town meeting approval, that ballot question would suffice, Pat?
That's correct, Dean, it would, yes. One thing to note, however, is that the ballot questions for debt exclusions and other actions under Prop 2.5 have to appear on the ballot in a form that's prescribed by the statute. It merely says in this case, shall the town vote to approve debt exclusion, relative to the project identified as 1610 Main Street Council on Aging, et cetera. It will not recite what the actual amount of the appropriation or the amount of the debt exclusion is. That financial aspect of the whole appropriation is not set forth in the ballot question. Accordingly, there could be some confusion or some questions raised in the minds of voters as to what the amount of the appropriation and thus the debt exclusion will be. But to answer your question legally, yes, the ballot question could proceed as presently scheduled and be effective for a subsequent town meeting appropriation vote.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, have I asked everybody so far?
Madam Chair, it's Peter.
Yeah, Peter, go right.
Town Council, I just want to let me go through simply what I think I heard. We have an opportunity, not an opportunity. We are coming up on trying to decide when we want to have a town meeting. Potentially, it's June 22nd. We have already existing all our warrant articles with the petition articles. For the board, when it comes to all the warrant articles, we can either leave them on the ballot, leave them in on the warrant, or we could open them up and take them off the warrant to be decided at some future time that we would want to consider them. However, on the petition articles, the Board of Selectmen can't do anything until the petition articles come onto the floor and motions, and you went through 4 options, which are in our package, and I understand that. Is that simply where we are now when we come up on whether we decide now or it's September, or April 27th?
Yes, Peter, I believe that was a very fair and accurate representation of the situation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. In consideration of all that we've heard and in light of a couple of questions for Julie in respect to some of her memo of what her concerns are for voters voting at the polls and whatnot. Julie, before we move forward any further, I'm not jumping the gun. I just wanted to hear what you had put in our packets as relations to what you're recommending if we do have a poll if we do have an election. I think whatever date it was, the 25th. What your needs were for your staffing and whatnot.
So you're looking for, what I had recommended in my memo was that Mass General Law, Chapter 54, Section 64 requires that the polls be open no later than noon and must be open for a minimum of 4 hours. In order to keep our workers as safe as possible and our our voters as well, I'd like to keep the hours as minimal as we could. Harwich has already recommended to cut their hours. They are, I believe, 11 to 6 was what they voted on. As you probably remember, the polls are generally open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m., which I think is a very long time for the election workers to be exposed potentially to COVID-19, if it's still the situation that we're in. So I'm recommending and hoping that we can kind of minimize their exposure and cut the hours a bit. The other thing is I would very, very seriously require that they have the proper PPEs if they are going to be sitting at the polls all day, or even sitting at the polls for 4 to 6 hours. I would want them to have masks, gloves, wipes, etc. I would have absentee ballots, early vote ballots available as early as I could, and have them available for mailing if people would like to vote from home instead of standing in line and voting, well, with the masses potentially. Especially with our elderly population, I don't feel very comfortable with a lot of our elderly voters coming and standing in a gymnasium, which has terrible ventilation. I don't know if there was anything else that I had asked you to consider. If you have any questions, let me know.
You're a mute.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you, Julie, in light of shortening the hours and, potential social distancing and whatnot that you might have to do. Is there any concern for people who might, if the polls close at 6, they'd still be able to vote if they were in line to vote? That would not be an issue, correct?
Of course, yes. Yeah, they would be the same laws and rules that we apply to any regular election. If people are at the polls at 6 p.m., the police officer stands behind them, and the last person that's in line is allowed to vote and continue through. So that wouldn't change.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions for Julie in relationship to the logistics of the voting? And then we'll double back and sort of regroup on what our next steps should be for all that we've discussed.
Madam Chair, it's Peter. Just one quick one.
Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Julie, when you said mail in, is that a absentee ballot? How is the mail-in? How are the mail-ins going to work and be certified?
It would be the same as an absentee ballot. The legislation that was passed, it was kind of a stopgap measure. Normally, when we do early voting, people come into the building, vote in the building. You probably remember from our last election, we had early vote in the town clerk's office. This act has allowed for mail-in early voting, which basically is the same as absentee, only it's a different envelope, quite honestly. So the absentees and the early votes would be brought to the polls. We would open them, we would check them off, and we would put the ballots through the machine. So basically the same as mail-in absentee voting.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Dean, go right ahead.
So similar question. So Julie, so I don't want to come in to vote in person. So I contact your office or email you and say I'd like to vote by mail or by absentee. What determines my choice should be?
Yes.
What determines?
It would be. I'm sorry. It would be whatever you're comfortable with. It would be the same as if you were requesting an absentee ballot, only we have a different application that's an early vote ballot, mail-in early vote ballot. You would fill that form out. You could send it in to us, fax it, email it to us. We would mail your ballot to you at your residence, and then you would mail that back to us, just like absentee.
It's basically a two-step process. I contact you, I send an email to, I know we're on critical level staffing now, but I send an email to the town clerk's office. I request either of those two. Then you mail the application out to me. I fill it out, I mail that back to you, and then you mail me the ballot. And then I mail that back.
It's one less step than that.
Okay.
You email your intent for a ballot, I mail you the ballot, and then you mail it back.
And when are the are absentee ballots always counted at the polls, or are they counted at the end? And what happens with the early votes? When are they counted?
Everything is counted at the polls during election day.
Okay.
So everything is compiled, checked off. Oh, we don't even open the envelopes until we arrive at the polls. Everything is transported, all sealed up. We open them up, put them through the machine, all throughout the day.
Okay.
And
thank you.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. I have a quick question for Julie. Julie, you mentioned that you needed 1 to 2 months lead time to pull off absentee balloting. Is it the same for mail-in balloting? Do you still need 1 to 2 months to do it well?
It would be the same, yes. Yeah, they're really interchangeable. It's something, the early voting mail-in ballots was simply added into this legislation just to make it easier for the voter. So they have the option of an absentee or an early vote if they choose.
Okay, just to nail that down a little now, you said 2 months, that would be April 27th in order to get, or April 25th or thereabouts to get you 2 months. Can you do it in a month?
I can do it in a month, yes, but I do need to get the wording of the ballot. I need to get the ballot set to the printer, have them print it. Generally, the printer is fast. I don't know what their staffing level is right now due to this situation. So usually they can turn them around quickly. So worst case scenario, yes, in a month we could get everything done. I'd
Yeah.
prefer to have more than a month so that we can get as many people that would like to vote from home can get those ballots, vote, and get them back to us.
All right. So a lot of this conversation is kind of dependent upon the governor's, what the governor does kind of May 5th, May 4th and 5th. So anyway, but this is all very helpful though. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Corey, did you have any questions for Julie?
Nope, I am all set. Thank you.
Okay, Julie, that was really informative. Appreciated that. That was good. All right. I just want to double back with everyone unless Julie has anything else you wanted to add.
I think that's it. I don't think you need to jump on a decision for the hours or the date would be good. But there is still time to make a decision on when and when it will be, what the hours will be. That I don't think we need, unless you would like to, I don't think that needs to be made today. That decision needs to be made today.
Julie, are you saying that you think we need to make the decision on the election today, or can we wait till the 27th?
I'm saying you can wait until the 27th. I'm saying there's no rush today.
Okay. Does anybody else have any further discussions on what we've talked about in the last 45 minutes or so? Go ahead.
Can I speak, Elaine Gibbs? The public.
I'm still having board discussion, Elaine, and then I'll ask you remote.
I just want to let you know I'm here.
Okay, thank you. So board, is there any other discussions that we have that you need to have right now? I'm thinking that we need to address all this and come back to it with hard decisions on the 27th, unless we wanted to continue the conversation tonight. Any comments from the board?
Madam Chair?
Dean, go right ahead.
I'm perfectly comfortable with Julie's recommendation, both as to the hours and also as to the date of the 25th. At Friday's Municipal Association webinar, I posed a question as to whether there was any likelihood that the legislature would further amend the general laws to allow a postponement of the elections beyond June 30th. The response was that as we got closer to the May 4th expiration of the governor's emergency order, there would be some likelihood of interest in the legislature to do something, but there's no absolute assurance that that's going to happen. So I think probably, given that a lot of people are going to be voting by mail, whether it's the mail ballot, the early mail ballot, or the absentee ballot, the sooner we get a date fixed for Julie, the better we would be, even if we were to do it tonight. We're not meeting again until the 27th, right? Because next week is a holiday, so.
Correct. Our next meeting is the 27th.
That's my thinking on it anyway.
Any other thoughts from the board?
It's Corey.
Corey, go ahead.
No. It looks like the 25th is the date that we have. So if the board does feel comfortable and give Julie, another 2-week lead time to do this, I don't have an issue with taking that action tonight.
Okay. Peter, any comments?
No, I tend to agree. Sounds
Jeffrey.
reasonable.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, no, I agree with the date. She won't be able to actually do the ballots because we don't know what's going to be on it yet.
Okay, so does somebody want to make a motion to set that date right now?
Madam Chair, it's Jill.
Yeah, what is the process, Jill? I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, and I agree, I think setting the date tonight is prudent. In your packet, there's an email from Julie to me, and she has the draft motion in there. And I can read it if you like. It says, pursuant to Section 1 of Chapter 45 of the Acts of 2020, and because of the state of emergency declared by the governor pursuant to Executive Order 591, declaration of a state of emergency to respond to COVID-19, the municipal town election scheduled for May 14th, 2020 is hereby postponed to, and then the date would be June 25th, 2020, if the board's amenable to that.
Madam Chair, I'll offer that motion. This is Dean.
Okay, Dean offered the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that,
Second.
Corey.
Corey, second. Okay, any further discussion from the board on that? Jeff?
Aye.
No, I'm not asking for a vote yet.
No,
Jeff.
no, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, any further discussion from Peter?
No.
Dean?
No.
Corey?
I don't, are you gonna go to the public?
Yes, sir, I am.
Thank
Any discussion or questions from the remote participants? And please state your name and wait to be called on after.
Yes, Elaine Gibbs. I appreciate the need for,
Go ahead, Elaine. Go ahead.
Elaine? Did you ask me to go ahead?
Yes.
Yeah, I've been listening to this and I understand and appreciate the concerns you all have and how complicated this is in strategizing. And it sounds to me like you have to do this to set a date because the governor's office hasn't said otherwise. But, my feeling is, people are away. This is a very complicated process. I mean, to get people who are not even back because they've been told they can't come back, and then they have to apply for absentee ballots or they have to fill out forms and do all this kind of stuff. And, there's going to be masks. I mean, I can't even imagine having a vote on June 25th at the polls. This is a really serious situation. And if it means we've got to contact Sarah Peak and Sear to talk to the governor and say a decision has to be made now where we can postpone all of this until the fall and just go on our operating budget on a month-to-month basis. I know that, 1/12, I had heard that earlier. I mean, that's the way to go. This is not the way to run, to handle a budget. We've got some serious capital projects ahead of us and we want as many people voting as possible and they're not going to be able to do it. It's way too complicated. I mean, there's probably only 10 of us that are on this when normally you would have so many more people participating because a lot of people don't even know how to sign on to participate in these remote meetings. So I hope that, if we could postpone the decision, fine. If you've got to do it, but I don't see how we can go forward with a June 25th date. It's just wrong. People are trying to figure out if they're going to be able to get food and how they're going to live and how they're going to, keep going, trying to multitask with educating their children. And to have to deal with this is just way beyond anybody's job grade, including yours. So I would hope that this gets postponed and I would hope you use every bit of power you have to make sure the governor, we're going to waste a lot of money and Julie's time and everybody else's time trying to put this together to find out we're not going to have to do it on June 25th. So I hope we can circumvent all that and postpone the whole thing. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the remote participants? Okay, hearing none. I'm going to take a roll. And Elaine, I'm wondering if you could mute your video because I see you up on the screen, but I don't see. Thank you. All right. Okay, so the motion was read by the town manager. Dean recommended the motion, and it was seconded by
Corey.
Corey, thank you. Okay, let's take a vote. Jeff,
Actually, Madam Chair, can you just wait on your vote? So we know we have to set an election sometime before June 30th. Do you want Pat to weigh in on what would be the process if we set the date tonight and we do have that flexibility to set it after July 1st?
that would be great. Thank you. Pat? Pat, are you still on? Might be muted.
Sorry about that. I had muted myself. Chapter 45 says in quite simple terms that notwithstanding the provisions of Chapter 39, et cetera, that the Board of Selectmen can vote to reschedule a municipal election or caucus to a date on or before June 30, 2020. That was adopted back on March 23rd. I would imagine that if the legislature deems it appropriate to further extend the deadline for municipal elections in light of the COVID-19 situation, they will more or less just do the same thing with a farther out end date for rescheduling elections. So I do think that even should the board vote tonight to establish the June 25th as the rescheduled election date, if the legislature does further relax the scheduling requirements, you will get another bite at the apple. You will have another opportunity to do the very same thing you're doing tonight by extending the election to a date beyond June 30th, if that's what the legislature allows.
Pat, thank you for the clarification. And is everybody clear with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's take a vote on this. Dean.
Aye.
Corey.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Chair.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay. All right. All right. Is there any other discussion on the items that we were discussing? I don't think we wanted to do anything else on letter B that I think of. So I guess if we're finished, we need to roll call, get a motion to adjourn and take a roll call.
Motion to adjourn, Peter.
Second, this is Dean.
Okay, motion to adjourn by Peter, second by Dean. The roll call, Dean,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye. Aye.
and the chair says aye. I want to make a note that it is 7:43 and we're adjourned and our meeting has been adjourned.
6:40.
6:43. Sure.
6:43.
6:43. Our meeting has been adjourned and stay well and stay safe, Chatham. And we'll meet on the 27th. Thank you.
Thank you.